Right, heat. Get ready to transition, y'all. The music that is. Get ready to go with the real man talk. Huh, 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 Yes, y'all. Facebook audience. Let's do what we came to do. Sound effects. Oh. Everybody, what's happening, everybody? We're getting ready to effect that transition as we were. Make sure we can. All right. Alexa, begin playlist broadcast transition.
Your playlist. Broadcast transition on Amazon Music.
All you Facebook people, you're going to have to refresh your page. We're resetting for the broadcast. All right. We're affecting that transition, y'all. Resetting that Facebook. Ladies and gentlemen, we're affecting that transition. Bringing in Victor Allen's Facebook, folks.
Sipping and schmoozing, getting to know you one question at a time. All right, sipping and schmoozing. Talking about whatever it is we like. Politics, religion, the human condition, music and fiction, your new addiction. Sipping and schmoozing, getting to know you one question at a time. Alright, sipping and schmoozing, talking about whatever it is we like. Sipping and schmoozing, sipping and schmoozing, sipping and schmoozing, sipping and schmoozing.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to Real Man Talk, the show that's Real Man Talk, but so much of it for the women, for the ladies. We welcome everyone to this show where Victor Allen and I are able to give our opinions from our vast resources of experience on how to deal with some of today's modern day problems. So everybody, first of all, let me welcome my partner in crime, Victor Allen.
So let me, I got this wrong. So we're only dealing with problems in dating. That puts a lot of weight around our shoulders.
Yeah, well, you can always have, I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah, wait a minute.
No, today we're giving advice. So usually when you're giving advice, you're not giving advice about things that are already good.
I know.
Because if it's already good, you don't need advice.
When you just said problems, I said.
Well, it's like I said, if you're going to give advice, what are you giving advice on?
Goodness.
That's right. It's already good. So we're like, why do we need advice? If you got goodness, why are you watching? You should be off doing something better.
That's jacked up, man.
Let's theorize. I'm theorizing. If all your shit is going real good, why are you here watching us?
Because, see, that's the part.
Oh, it's choice.
See, there you go.
It's choice.
There you go.
Choice, man.
There you go. There you go.
It's choice. That's like me. We used to see the brothers out in front of 7-Eleven on Friday, like 10 o'clock at night, having a 40. You say, what are you doing out here? You say, man, we're choice. It's out here behind everybody's choice.
You go with to where it's good, man.
Let me take off the overlay. I got the overlay still out there, big. Let me take this off. Live at 8. I got all this stuff on. There we go. Transitioning. See, it's too many tabs. Sometimes it's too many tabs for a brother to keep up with. And so it is for the holiday season. I want to say, first of all, Merry Christmas to everyone out there. The topic for tonight is not really so much, Vic, like you said, is it about problems? What I wanted to talk to them is giving them some insight with what we think is the issues to be expected as you adjust to a new relationship. Okay? Because one of the things that people have been talking to me about online, because I am the guru of relationships.
All by yourself.
Oh, right. Well, I pulled you in.
Right.
But, if we were to advise people about the common pitfalls that go into establishing a relationship, because one of the things that happens, young people tell me, is they hear folks say, well, relationships are work. Relationships are work, but they don't understand exactly what you mean. So in a lot of ways, it's a vague term. When we tell young folks that relationships are work, they're not quite understanding what we mean. And I think if we say that to each other, it may be so different that the terms we use amongst each other that we might find the same problem. I mean, Vic, when I say that to you, relationships are work. You first of all, do you even agree with that statement that relationships are work?
Yeah, and I just think it's your attitude, and I think it's all age correlated because you, depending on where you're at in time, you look forward to the work. Then you get to a period of time where you say it's kind of leveled off. Then you get to the other side where you're going, God damn, it's a lot of work.
Give me some examples of what you're
Well, when you're younger, you're going like this. I'm ready to get out here. Let me spread my wings, see what I can do, and it's work, but you're not pitted with all the other conditions of life, the lifestyle. You may or may not have to pay bills. You may or may not be living on your own. You may be still at your parents' house. Those floating things tend to make you sit there and go, you have a little bit of a cushion. So when you're younger, you can't wait to work on relationships because you're trying to establish yourself. And then when you're getting more successful at it, you don't really dwell on the ones that didn't work. You just move on to the next. You get seasoned. You get in that mid-stride. You start going, man, I got responsibilities. I better be careful how I flow. What am I doing? Real life can catch you, and you could be surprised by things. You may have a lot of times where you're dating and go, I'm having so many bad experiences, so it's now baggage. Now you're not looking forward to it as much. Then when you get past that season period, you start looking at everybody going, all right, I've been there, done there. What you got? What you gonna make me do? What am I going to spend more money on? You start counting your chips, your consciousness, your whole thing. Some people don't go through that. So I think it's all relative to your experiences, really.
So I'm adding that into my discussion tonight because that's such a good point. But I'm actually just going to change the format a little bit to accommodate specifically that. Because I think we do, when we talk about the work of relationships, I think based on what Vic said, which I think is a great insight, is that it actually is different at different ages. The work of relationship, which is there, for you to ignore or not, at every stage there is some work of relationship, but it becomes more apparent as you get older. So let's take an example, Vic. What I thought we would do is because The advice they were actually the folks that were reaching out to me, believe it or not, were actually seeking our advice.
Okay.
More females than males, actually, way more females.
Okay.
So that's what's so interesting about Real Man Talk is that there's way more females than males
Right.
that end up watching it, and so we know that they want that perspective. So let's talk about by age. In the age of 20 to 30, what is the work of relationship at that point?
You're like Discovery. It's Discovery Channel, brother. This is all Discovery. You're not looking at it the same way. Okay, you work, you run into some pitfalls, you don't even count the baggage. You're going on to the next. It's the kind of work where you're going to have this doctrine, this feeling, I'm growing. As far as a man, we haven't hit our stride until our mid-30s. So in our 20s, we're in discovery mode, man. Now, some of us are exceptional, so it's more discovery to us. It doesn't matter if we don't have money. It doesn't matter. We are in discovery mode. We're
Does that mean you're saying they're not working?
No.
They're not working on the relationship?
No.
What is the work? What is the work?
But see, when you say that, because if I think about it, you know what the main work for me is one, making sure I can get out on my own and be out of the house at the earliest age possible. That was my goal. That was more work for me than saying, oh, what am I doing with this relationship? I'm trying to establish my kingdom. I'm trying to be the man.
So you're mainly saying there really wasn't much work of relationships. Okay, let me give you a perspective, for example.
Okay.
I would say if I had to say the work of relationships with 20 to 30 was mostly involved with entertaining the other person.
That's not work.
I mean, that was the only real work.
Right.
It was mostly the whole sex, like you said, it was dominated by sex. That age range is so dominated by sex.
Where did you
that
want
the
to
work, if you're going to be working at a relationship, I think the work is to be honest.
Right.
If you're going to work,
Right.
develop habit sets of honesty and communication, because that can happen between that 20 to 30 range.
Did you at the time want to go out on more dates or entertain them at your domicile, your cave, your kingdom?
No, at that time I wanted to go out on more dates, but I would say even then I did stress communication.
Yes.
I wanted some of us, I wanted the girls to have a good time.
Right.
So the work to me
That
was about trying to show them a good time somehow.
And it
Take them somewhere,
Yes.
show them something,
It was a good time.
try to come up with something. You
Yeah.
know, you felt a pressure to me to entertain them. And then the other thing is I think they had an expectation of being entertained
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent.
Mhm.
And therefore you were judged by that.
Yes. Absolutely. And it was and because a lot of things were happening. That's why I said it was interesting because, and I'm not going back a little bit because, of course, going to college and everything. But once you got out of college, were you looking forward to having your own place so you could entertain? You going?
No, you're interested. That's what I said. And keeping that in mind, that we were driven sexually
Right.
toward conquest.
Mhm.
What was the work, once you were in a relationship, what did the work of that relationship consist of? And to me, it was, again, trying to be honest with the fact, because you were usually doing a bunch of stuff, male and female.
Right.
So the work is trying to be honest
All right.
and communication, developing communication patterns. Whether you were going to be a person who talked about things or whether you were just a person who kind of processed things on your own. This was definitely coming clear
Mm-hmm.
in the age from 20 to 30. Well, okay, Vic, how about the work of relationships, first of all, between 30 to 40? Because somewhere between 30 to 40, let's just say...
Every successful relationship needs the care and nurturing of two committed
That's a good one,
adults,
bro.
giving to
That's
each
a good
other
one.
in a way that creates a mutually beneficial.
That's your artificial intelligence, man, jumping in on the conversation.
Man, that's like this phone.
That's a nice little transition, man. That's like that movie Her. You know, maybe you're moving in that direction.
I have to resume. That's resuming the 360 broadcast.
Okay.
Okay, so it definitely changes from we said 20 to 30. And let's, for all intents and purposes, when we say 20 to 30, let's say we're always talking about the back end more than
Right.
the front end.
Right.
Because you're changing.
Yes.
So at 30 to 40, you have a bunch of changes that occur.
Yes.
And the work of relationships becomes more complex because I think for this is the time, at least for women, based on their own biological clocks, they're starting to be more expressive about their needs.
Right.
So this is a challenge for most men.
Right.
And most men, the times between 30 and 40, relationships are way more challenging on a personal level.
Mhm.
And for women, it becomes more about them expressing themselves,
True.
too.
True.
So the work, for you, Vic, and it's all right to be personal, and the time that was for you during that time,
Right.
what was the work that you had to deal with?
Mine was definitely being established in your career, having a place where you're going, a direction.
I mean, how was that impacting your relationship?
Very much so, because the women that I dealt with, that was a big deal to them. It's funny because you're thinking all you have to be is honest, truthful.
Well, no, I'm
Yeah.
asking what the
Yeah.
work is.
The work was
the work is different in different relationships.
Right.
Different factors come up.
almost any relationship that was, say, I was in with a girlfriend, a couple, boyfriend. It was about the plan for the long term.
Well, I think that I would have to echo at least that.
Yeah.
That was whether you wanted to avoid it or not.
That was
I
the
would say
plan.
everybody wanted to get married too, but but we're saying the same thing.
Yes, we are.
In the 30s, between 30 and 40, everything got serious because everybody was looking toward the long term.
Because maybe I may say that's just I was a little bit slower then. The word security was kind of like a, for me, I was kind of oblivious to it in my 20s. But when it came into the 30s, it became a big deal because of what security meant. It was a transference of, oh, okay, can we plan this life together? And a lot of times people have already chosen you and said, here's where we're going. You are it. And for the most part, where are we going? And the type of work you're doing. And it's not just about going out on a dinner date, that I learned, or going out to a concert. It was more. In other words, your casa is my casa. Your house is my house. I learned a lot of that, man. Not preparing for it, but because of the relationships and how women were discussing and talking with me. It was a big deal. That was work.
That was the first time where it really felt like work because
Yeah.
really more than the 20s, like we said, it just was that you weren't focused in it.
Yeah, sure.
But in between 30 and 40, because everything suddenly became about the long term.
Right.
In other words, when you're younger, nobody worries about marriage because you're not thinking about getting married. You think about partying.
Yeah.
Now, when you get to like between that 30 and 40, all of a sudden everybody's thinking about marriage. Everybody I dated had some kind of it was always like Victor said about the long term, which meant now things like your career, what you were building,
Yes.
all of that became of issue because women they were now looking at you and whether or not you looked like you were going to be a provider.
Yes.
As a consequence, too, many men start to look at the women as terms of how they're going to be a contributing partner. And they don't start to look the same. Some of the ones that used to look good stop looking so good. You know, the ones that maybe didn't look as good. And the women say the same things because if the issue becomes a common cause of action,
Mm-hmm.
that's hard to find, but that is the thing everybody's attempting to do between 30s and 40s.
Yeah, because some people are probably having more difficulty in dating, and some people are having more difficult in the established relationships. I didn't have difficulty in dating. What I had to deal with once you were in the relationship, the big question comes, is this it? And I know a couple of occasions, me being a professional, employee in corporate, a few times having someone say, is this all you want to do? I knew what that meant. That was like, wait a minute, yeah, everything's cool. This is not good enough. So reality hits you in a lot of different ways. And so, the part that says you're gonna have to work harder, don't be complacent. Don't take for granted. Don't just sit up there and satisfy what you think is cool. You know, he says, this is the hardest you're going to grind. This is all you're going to do. So I'm
Well,
going
what if they want you to do that? Now, if you have a woman who doesn't really care about that,
then it's totally different.
even though this is the part, you know, when they ask you what is the problem in marriage, they say the first three things are money, money, money.
Yes.
Then sex.
Yes, because it comes around.
Right, because plus it's the first time in your life where you have to go back to someone telling you what to do. I mean, you spend your whole youth becoming independent with your money, and then you're independent with your money, and finally all of a sudden you end up in a relationship and someone's trying to tell you what to do with your money.
Well, and you know what? And to follow your point, it's another category. You said money and sex, but there was love. So that's part of it cuts through there, even at a young age.
There definitely is love, so that's why the work. Okay, that's why I was going to get to certain things, because I did have a list of what I call universal issues. I mean, there are some issues in relationship that are work issues that are there from the time you're a teenager.
Right.
Honesty I put there as a challenge, Vic.
Right.
And I put it there because of always, especially when you're young,
Right.
is the issue of how truthful, how forthcoming to be.
Right.
Because initially when you're young, you're trying so hard to present your best side that in a lot of ways it's just not a truthful representation. You're trying to present your best side, and it's really not the real you. So there's a challenge with being honesty. And that's the way I'm defining honesty. I mean your willingness to tell the truth about who you are and what you're doing. Fidelity is a big challenge when you're young because your hormones are raging. It's hard to stick to one person.
Mm-hmm.
So how you deal with fidelity and honesty again becomes an issue that defines how you're going to do things.
Right.
And it actually starts for many of us right then. To what degrees you're willing to lie, are you willing to lie? Those are the kind of things.
Right.
That is. So these again what I was defining as a universal issue.
Right.
I said honesty and communication because communication you could define over and over.
Right.
I tried to keep it simple, right? You know, you and I, we tend to like to use less terms, less. So I say communication because that seems like that stays to work
Yes.
your whole life.
Yes.
You know, just work on us. But here's the thing that I found interesting. Honesty versus getting along. Because there are instances where honesty may be overrated. I'm not saying to lie. I'm just saying honesty versus getting along.
Right.
What do you think about that, Vic? Because that's a work issue. See, I thought about that. One of the things that happens in a relationship that's work to me is that sometimes it really doesn't matter whether you're right or not.
Right.
In other words, if you win the fight, it's not over.
Right.
So that's the other part of honesty. But I'm not using it in terms of a pure form, but when there's sometimes when you let issues go,
Right.
and in that letting go of an issue, you may feel like you're not dealing with the issue up front. Somehow you are violating a principle. But somehow that's going to come up in a relationship
Right.
at some point, how honest you are, and in what ways you're honest, on what kinds of issues.
Well,
That's real.
Yeah, and I think it's a case by case depending on each individual you're dating or in a relationship with, because honesty may be the discovery that you think somebody's it and they don't think you are. That you may. So a lot of that is, for me, is probably different than your experiences, and I agree with you. I said, do you want to hear the honest truth? So I always harken back to. It was different in my 20s, which I won't get into a long story. I think I've already mentioned on the previous show about being accepted, being the choice. So it came up in a time where, of course, it was taught that you are not the one that they're going to want. So to overcome that. And then when you get that later down the road, you're talking about synergy, getting along, like you said. I think honesty, you could just be honest. and you will discover maybe you guys just don't click. Sometimes you try to make things work out because you believe the person's a little bit too hardcore. They just haven't seen it your way. And sometimes you try to do everything and they just don't click with you. So I've had where honesty actually may have done you a favor. Sometimes you try to force something to work because of how hard you feel about that person. But you have to be able to see them for what message they're sending you. You know if you're the one. That's the part that I had to deal with a lot, is knowing, oh, I'm not the one. But back in there, you couldn't tell me. I'm coming. I'm still coming. I'm
That was
bringing
part
it.
of growth,
Yeah.
I guess.
Right.
Knowing when you were and were not the one.
I'm going to make me the one. And you get sometimes stubborn, but you learn through that. And then sometimes you go, okay, now the problem is do you evolve? And do you just thrust that on every relationship? I'm stepping into your domain. You need to know me. I'm coming for you, regardless of how you feel about me. I know some people that's like that. I've learned now to go, you'll know if you're the one. We sometimes go, oh man, I hope I'm not the one. You went through that.
Well, so remember, so everybody who's listening here, we're talking about the work of relationships at the different stages of your life. So one of the things that is work is to determine whether or not you're in the right thing for the right reason, and both people may be wrong on that, and not know it. We've experienced that, right?
Yes.
It's hard to know, even being introspective. This is the part about relationships that is hard to predict, even when you're in there.
Right.
It may feel like something to both of you that turns out not to be. And the work of the relationship is communication, at least so you can be friends and to recognize what's going on. And whether or not you want to recognize it. One of the things that prolongs bad relationships is people don't want to see the flaws.
No.
They refuse to see the flaws, and they lie to themselves about the mistakes that are going on in a relationship. And therefore, whatever efforts they're doing is like building a castle of sand.
Right. Yeah. Man, how many times you can go back and say, let me introduce my flaws. Let me tell you what I'm not good at. Those words.
Now I do that.
Yeah. Well, okay, but look. Well, when
Not
we're saying,
then.
well, see now.
I'm not even sure I knew then
Right. No, wait a
what my
minute.
flaws were.
First of all, you would probably go like this. That person sees it's a flaw. They need glasses. They don't see it the right way. For us,
My flaw was
right? We didn't look at it that way.
My wild man proclivities.
Right, because you can always have somebody. See, that's why I say it'd be a wonderful show. One day somebody's gonna come in here and says, "Okay, I listened to the show, Mario. I was the one who thought you was the king."
Well, you gotta start some shit, man. If mine can come, yours can come. Okay? And we know a bunch of fellas out there that can be subject
This
to the
is your
same.
show.
Why you gotta come by? You gotta come.
This is your show.
Everybody, we're talking about the work of relationships and the couples adjusting to each other. The work of relationships, the work that continues throughout relationships. And we were breaking it down by age from 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50. So we talked already about some of the general work. And when we come back for part 2, we're going to talk about the work of relationships that is sex. All right? The work of relationships that is sex. Now we take a musical break to medicate. Take a break to medicate.
You're too young to be on that bridge. You're too young to be standing on the edge. Too young. You're too young. You just wanna be understood. You just wanna be. Give less if you could.
right, all free music. Love Shadow featuring Snowflake, Too Young. Remember, I put the links in earlier. dig.ccmixter.org is where you can get the all free music that we use here at the show. That's why we can use it. It's copyright free. All free music. You can have it and share it with your friends. Go and get some and go there and search Love Shadow. Or if you just search Love Shadow and Creative Commons, you'll find it and be part of the movement. All right, we've been talking about the work of relationships on Real Man Talk to show that it's real man talk, but so much of our audience is the ladies seeking to get the male perspective on the brides in these issues. And Vic and I are attempting to speak honestly, especially looking back over our lives where we've grown as men. One of the things that we pride ourselves on, and maybe that's the reason we talk about this, is that we find it easy to talk about our changes with time and how we've grown as men. And we had a bunch of partying days. Some of the people who were in that chat room, like Audrey, know. One year we had 9 parties. we were alley cats to a certain degree. But things change. And so the work of relationship changes. We talked in the first part 1, we talked about the work of relationships and the adjustments that folks do from 20 to 30, then 30 to 40, and finally 40 to 50. And also we acknowledge what we call the universal work of relationships that continues throughout your life. The work of honesty. By that we mean fidelity, also honesty in terms of communication and other forms of communication with your partner, and being honest in that way, which is also intimacy, which is a challenge that remains with you for all your life. So we acknowledge that just those two are difficult. And then we mentioned at least the issue of honesty versus getting along. In other words, the concept of having to pick your battles. And sometimes honesty, total honesty, is overrated, and one has to search for ways to communicate some things while taking into account the weaknesses or sensitivities of their partner. Mm-hmm. One of those big areas is sex. Vic, would you agree that the work of sex stays around pretty much in some form?
Oh yeah.
From the very beginning of sex, right? Almost.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It just comes. It comes with more things, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, when you're early, everybody's discovering experience. It's not too much hanging with it, but as you get older, wiser, more mature, there's a lot more that's wrapped around it. You know, your lifestyle, especially when you get to what they call the seasoned age of wisdom, whatever you want to call that, and they go. Well, most women go like this. If you're dealing with somebody that's 30-ish and above, you're not supposed to be talking to me unless you're talking about the whole package, the whole plan. Oh, the sex is the easy part. It's the rest that comes with it. So it depends on your perspective to me. Now, that's just from my experience. That has been, sex is not an issue. It's what other things come with that.
Well, let's put it this way. What would be the issue with sex? Because remember, part of what we're talking about is the work.
Right.
So when you're initially young, to me, the work that is sex, the universal two apply more. Mm-hmm. It's actually more stressful. The honesty and communication is stressful more than ever in that early sex because you want to get the sex done. And sometimes the shit women make you go through in terms of professing a relationship when you're young. I'm talking about in those early years, even before 20.
Oh, it was harder.
Leading
earlier.
from like the beginning of your late adolescence into your 20s.
Hard.
It was a big adjustment because sex was demanding emotionally. That's even though the physical was there, right? Mm-hmm. Because this was this closeness or lack thereof, or whatever occurs at the times you're attempting the sex, that was formative, right? That was almost, that's why I said the universal pressure of honesty and communication. Because that first sex, hopefully, I always said the best thing for a woman is to have an older man who's not interested in having a really good experience.
Oh, wow.
For their first time.
For their
Because the
first-
best thing a virgin needs is a man
Right.
who's seasoned and mature,
Right.
who knows there's not going to be any good sex.
Right.
Right. And he's just not even going to try to make it that. He's going to try to make it what you need for your first experience.
Mhm.
But it takes a man of that consciousness. And if you don't have a man like that, if you're a young girl who gets a young guy to take your virginity, heaven help you. Heaven help you.
And you may get lucky and find somebody, if it's an older man, let's say, and when I say older, let me say this, a more mature thinking man can probably give you both. You didn't expect.
Well, it has to be, because to me, the one thing I would say about young people, this is the part about the work of sex. We're talking about an age, we're talking about in our late teens, early 20s. It's an era of evolving responsibility, and just the coping with that is the work.
Mhm.
The biggest work is just coping with the decision making you have now over your body.
Right.
The unprecedented decision making, and that's going to cause you some challenges. That is the work. But even though I mentioned again, the universal issues of honesty and communication continue.
Right.
And this is where you're developing certain habits with your early lovemaking or your early courtships. Even if you're being like us, chasing a bunch of girls
Right.
because we were out there being exposed to them.
Right.
How is it you related to them? I, for one, and actually, Vic, I would say that for you and most of our crew, a lot of us had a number of women friends around.
Yeah, and that's later in years, not
Right.
earlier. Yeah. the
No,
later
that's
years.
like in our 20s, though.
Yeah, late 20s.
It's late 20s.
Yeah, yeah, true, absolutely. I mean, it's the discovery. You're discovering a lot of things, really. It's just amazing, and I think everybody's story and journey is a little bit different. But it took a while for me. The only reason why I'm saying is I know a lot of people are going to say, "Oh yeah, well," I said I had to really get over. It took a while beyond college to go, "Oh, so somebody really, really wants me," because I grew up in a community where I was designated, clearly by our own people, you are not the type because of your skin color. I was told that quite often. So it took a while for me to gain the confidence. So even if somebody, when I going through college, I would go, well, they may be interested, but I'm not the one.
Well, and I'm sure a lot of people at the time, based on color,
Yes.
I mean, there were a lot of things. What's interesting is everybody has different versions of that kind of an issue.
Yeah.
I know for me, mine was weight.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I was so kind of embarrassed
Right.
about my body style and shape
Right.
that, so everybody
See?
kind of had different stuff,
Yeah, right.
different, and everybody did. And I guess that's why you become friends, because you learn to support each other.
And I do know of people who till today still are overcoming a lack of self-confidence because of what has happened in their past and how they overcome it. And I had to thank my mom, rest in peace, to keep reinforcing it, because it can be an anchor on your ankle, and it takes time. So a lot of times you end